Hi, I'm Sophia Paffenroth, and I'm a health reporter with Mississippi Today. Recently, I wrote a story on antipsychotic drugging in Mississippi nursing homes. This was a story that was really born out of the data. Across the United States, 1 in 5 nursing home residents is given powerful and mind-altering antipsychotic drugs. In Mississippi, that goes up to 1 in 4 residents. But in the general population, only about 1 in 50 people is on these drugs, and the conditions they treat do not become more common with age. We spoke to experts and industry leaders who helped us understand what the numbers mean and how they point to a larger issue, the way America cares for its elders. We also spoke to nursing home workers on the ground in Mississippi. They shared with us why these drugs can be dangerous in people with dementia and what can be done to mitigate overprescription. They pointed to low staffing and lack of training as 2 of the biggest contributing factors to the epidemic. They showed us what good dementia care looks like and offered viable solutions to the nursing home industry going forward. If you or a loved one has experience with antipsychotic drugging in a Mississippi nursing home, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us by filling out the survey at the end of the story or by emailing us directly at info@mississippi.today.org.
Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story.
I'm Geoff, Pender, politics editor, joined here today with our editor, Adam Ganucheau. Adam, hello.
Hey, y'all. Joining by phone today from beautiful Oxford, Mississippi. Glad to be with you.
Okay. Might be a little football going on this weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, might be. We'll see.
Right. And Bobby Harrison. Bobby, hello.
Hey, Geoff. Hey, Adam. How y'all doing?
Good. Look, Bobby, maybe we'll start out with you. You covered a big event this week, a lot of build up before it. It was House Speaker Jason White's tax summit open to the public.
Much ballyhooed.
Tax cut summit, tax elimination summit. Give us a thumbnail of what that was.
Well, it was well attended. It was at out in Flowwood at that new resort out there. I guess it's not. I mean, it's relatively new, but it was well attended. More than 500 people signed up. I think most of those people were there, and it was a wide. It was a diverse group of people. I think there were a lot of people there who were not excited about what was the primary topic of the summit, which was phasing out or eliminating the personal income tax. There's people there who had some concerns about that, I think is fair to say. But the Speaker White billed this summit as a fact-finding mission, not just that was looking at not just the income tax elimination, which Speaker White has come out in favor of, but also looking at the tax structure as a whole. But most of the time was spent on the elimination of the income tax. Governor Reeves spoke, and of course he's a big proponent of eliminating the income tax. Trey Lamar, the House Ways and Means Committee, perhaps the Speaker White's chief lieutenant, spoke and provided a lot of numbers why the state could eliminate the income tax. But then there was the Senate Finance Committee chair, which is a counterpart of Trey Lamar. He spoke, and why he and some other senators spoke for support in principle for eliminating the income tax. They expressed a lot of reservations, and we can get in those as we talk about it. But it was well attended. It was a day-long event. Grover Norquist was there. He's been talking about tax cuts since it seems like since I was a little boy, and he's still talking about tax cuts, and he pulled a lot of numbers out, and he's always been in favor of cutting income taxes.
Sure. And this talk is coming, Bobby, maybe help explain. It's coming as we have greatly cut income taxes, and the cuts are still being phased in. We're already partially there, right?
Yeah, I think these numbers are correct, Geoff, Adam. In 2016 it was we cut
The franchise tax.
Well, also the income tax.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we cut. I mean, it was a big cut in the income tax, and we came back in 2022. And by the way, the franchise tax, which is a cut to companies, it's still being phased in. And in 2022, came back and passed a record $525 million cut to the income tax, and that's still being phased in. And yet, when as Josh Harkins, the Senate Finance Committee chair, pointed out, the income tax is, we used to say about a third of the state general fund revenue, but now it's between a third and a quarter because of all the cuts that's being implemented to the income tax. But still, it's the second largest source of state revenue that we're talking about eliminating. So and so Harkins and some other people said maybe we need to pause and look at that. So
see how the cuts play out today.
And Harkins also, and I knew, we reported on this a lot, but I never had, and Geoff, I mean, you maybe was a primary reporter on it, but Harkins pointed out that during the pandemic, Mississippi got, this is a staggering number, $33 billion in COVID relief funds that, there's money, billions of dollars that went directly to the state, a total of billions of dollars that went to local city and county governments. But then, we sometimes neglect the fact that businesses got huge sums of money to help
individuals.
I remember
schools.
In schools, I remember getting those. What was it? Was it $1,200 checks? Which was pretty cool. And those things had a tremendous impact on the state revenue collections. We've experienced revenue collections like we never experienced before, which makes makes you think we can afford to reduce the income tax. And the revenue collections are still high, but they're slowing. And revenue collections are actually barely growing now year over year. So I wrote about this recently that it's not if they did started a tax cut this year or the 2025 session, the state could afford it because of the money in the bank. But what you need to look at is how reducing 30% of the state revenue is going to impact state government 20 years from now, even 10 years from now. Most of the politicians who are in office now advocating for this tax cut, they're probably not even going to be around then. We know Governor Reeves will not be. He's term limited. So there's a lot of things to look at with this tax cut.
Sure. And that's one thing I think maybe the Senate has said, our economy right now nationwide and in Mississippi, it's shifting sands. I know something you've written about, a lot of our increase in money we have on hand has been coming from high interest rates and inflation. Inflation increasing sales tax revenue and all that. Well, now we're starting to see that cut. We're starting to see inflation come down. The feds have made one cut. We know more is coming. Seems like that could perhaps have at least a short-term impact if we're not receiving that interest. The federal spigot's turned off, and interest rates and inflation are coming down.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of ironic. Inflation, of course, has been a terrible thing for consumers, but the flip side of inflation is that income salaries are growing right now. They're not as growing as fast. Wages are not growing as fast in Mississippi as the rest of the nation, but they are growing. And so that helps with the revenue, and then the inflation helps with the sales tax collections, which is the sales tax is still the primary source of revenue in Mississippi, and the tax on retail items. And then it's kind of ironic that now revenue collections are slowing, but we have, as I stated, we have this tremendous reserves right now because of how much revenue grew over the past 3 or 4 years because of those COVID relief monies that we talked about. And so the interest on those reserve funds, it's just, I mean, that's right now, that's propping up the state general fund revenue collections. If it wasn't for that interest earnings, we'd actually be collecting less year over year than which is very unusual for the state to collect less revenue than the previous year.
Guys, I just wanted to say, we're talking about all these factors, right? And one thing that I saw a Twitter thread from Governor Reeves, I think on the same day that he went out to this summit last week. And
yeah, that was essentially his speech, Adam.
Yeah. And, he talked in his speech about sort of, he's trying to preempt what he thinks is going to be the sort of the pushback to any sort of effort here to totally eliminate the income tax, right? And a big sort of key of his that he pointed out was sort of political actors who are trying to slow conservatives down, basically. Of course, conservative Republicans in the South and in America have long been champions of cutting or eliminating taxes. We know that. But, to suggest that tax policy experts, economists, people whose jobs it is to sort of run the models, assess sort of the big picture, not just a political talking point or two or three, but sort of look at the data, look at the numbers, and try to predict. That's a hard business, and nobody has ever claimed that it's an exact science or that it's precise. But there are people who do this full time, and the thing that we have heard consistently from the people who do this all the time is the first word of warning is this has never been done by any state in America. No state has ever had an income tax and totally eliminated it in a way that our governor and certain others in the legislature right now are sort of advocating for. And so, Bobby, I liked in the story, I liked, hearing you just now talk about someone like Senator Josh Harkins, a Republican from the same home county as Tate Reeves, the governor. These are people who know each other well, trying to kind of be a little bit more measured about this and say, hey, we are in a good position right now. Tate Reeves loves to say we're in the best financial and fiscal positions we've ever been in Mississippi. And in many ways, that could be true if you're looking at the amount of money that the state has in its bank right now or its coffers right now. But this is not some theoretical game that could affect people one way or another. This will be affecting people one way or another. I know that Governor Reeves and his supporters on this think that it's a good thing for Mississippians to pay less in taxes and give less money to the government. But there are a lot of other people who those same people who may agree with that political statement also rely day in and day out on state services that are funded almost totally by the income tax revenue that we're bringing in every year. And if that goes away, what does it look like? The answer to that question is no one knows. The experts don't know. The politicians don't know. It's never been done in America before. And I appreciate anybody, especially the Republicans in the legislature, like Josh Harkins, who are saying, happy to have this conversation, guys, but we got to be careful with this because this really could go the totally wrong way. And then we're going to be left having to pick up the pieces months and years down the road.
Yeah, Adam. Just talking about people who rely on state services and funding, it was interesting to me that at the summit, at this tax cut summit, if you will, that there were people, manufacturing representatives there, who talked about not tax cuts, but talked about workforce training and developing what do you call it, Geoff? Site ready.
Industrial sites, economic development.
Yeah, so that, and they didn't say they were against tax cuts, but they that
wasn't the top of
that
their
wasn't
agenda.
the top. And also, it was pointed out, I hadn't even thought about this, but we've had these tax cuts over in 2022 and 2016, and they were tax cuts to the personal income tax. The corporate income tax has not been cut. Other corporate taxes have been cut, but not the income tax. So they were pointing out, some people were fearful that they didn't want the as you cut the personal income tax to, come back in 5 years when revenue was not doing what they thought it'd be doing, and increase the corporate tax to offset that lost revenue. Some people expressed concerns about that.
One thing I think the last couple of years, as we, post-pandemic, talked about huge tax cuts, eliminating the income tax. Not a lot gets said about where we were just a few years ago. Before that, I mean, as recently
talking about
as
his revenue
2018, we still weren't looking so great. 2016, we were in a dire position.
Well, if you
having
recall,
to make huge cuts. I mean,
Department of Health had to make huge cuts and cut programs. Mental health was suffering.
And so that leads me to believe that Mississippi, if you call it in its best financial shape, I don't doubt that. But why is that? I don't think it was because of any magic structural changes or policy that anyone made. We're in that best financial shape because the feds turned on the spigot and spent money at an unprecedented rate. And lo and behold, the state most dependent on federal spending saw boom times.
Yeah, some of the best, greatest benefits from that.
Yeah. I mean, that stands to reason. But I mean, again, that spigot's turned off. A lot of things are about to be changing. So where are we going to be when that settles out? When we get, I think we're in a false economy still, a propped up one. Where are we going to be when that settles out? And that may be something to look at before you jump and do. I mean, they've already done huge tax cuts. We're already going to be of states that have an income tax. When this settles out after next year, we're going to be one of the lowest among the top 10 or 11, I think, lowest income tax rates in the state, if not the top 5, actually.
Yeah. Governor Reeves, Geoff, Adam, tried to make that argument that, we're in this best financial shape in the history, and you can argue that that's true. I think you can make that argument, but in terms at least revenue collection, we're in the best financial shape. And he says we did this 2016 tax cut, we're doing this 2022 tax cut. So he made the argument to see this proves we're in such a strong financial condition now that it proves that these tax cuts work. But what he doesn't mention is Geoff, the federal, the COVID relief money and the other factors that contributed to that financial shape that we're in now. And he also, his speech was, quote, dispelling myths about tax cuts. And he also he said he was dispelling the myth that the tax cut would result in a slowdown or halt in jobs creation. He said that, that there were people who opposed to the tax cuts and said if you implement these tax cuts, you won't have any jobs creation. I don't really remember that argument, but if that's the argument, for the benefit of the doubt, let's say that is the argument. If you go back and look, we've had among the slowest job growth since the pandemic for the past 2016 when the tax cut started of any state in the nation. When, in 2023, according to a study by USA Today, we're in the bottom 5 for jobs growth. And ironically, another state that was in the bottom 5 is the poster child for Governor Reeves of what a reduction of the income tax would be. He pointed out that Governor Reeves, he always liked to cite Tennessee. Tennessee doesn't have a income tax, and he cites that as a state we should be like. Well, Tennessee was also in the bottom 5 in 2023 in terms of jobs creation. And before, I'd be remiss before we wrap this up to, another issue that was debated or talked about a lot at the summit was the other tax cut that's kind of on the table, the reduction or the elimination of the 7% grocery tax, which is, of course, the highest in the nation of its kind. There seems to be, guys, I think there's a lot of momentum to do that. I think that, the grocery tax generates about roughly $500 million or less per year. So it's the income tax is over $2 billion. So the grocery tax would be more doable than the income tax. And I think there's a lot of momentum to do something with the grocery tax. And ironically, Geoff, and not ironically, it's the bad word, but it's important to note that Toby Barker, the mayor of Hattiesburg, was former I think the outgoing chair of the state municipal league, was at the summit, and one of the factors that people talk about is that the municipal league might oppose the grocery tax reduction or elimination because they get a portion of that money. Yeah. And Barker said that it was important to help people with their taxes, and so he and I think would be the municipal league's position too. He said that he would not be against it as long as there was a reasonable way to sort of make them whole, to ensure that they still get the money that they would lose if the grocery tax was what was cut or eliminated.
Yeah, I think just among the populace, definitely the grocery tax probably is the more popular. Just given inflation and what people are seeing in grocery stores, it's clear and present for them.
Yeah, and they can see that. I mean, they can see that every day of their lives, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, the grocery tax is, as we've talked about a lot, one of those taxes that does affect, people who can't otherwise afford to pay taxes more than people who can. I mean, everybody goes to the grocery store and pays the exact same amount of tax on milk or bread or eggs. And, to me, that's something that, why wouldn't we cut or eliminate that if we can? And it could be seen as a lot of the Republican talking points during this presidential election are about inflation, Bidenflation as they call it. And what better way to kind of counteract something like that than the basics at a grocery store. But again, I know there's some stuff to point out. And look, I want to say one more thing before we wrap up. I know we're about to go, but I think anybody listening to this podcast who might really, really favor eliminating any taxes, period, may listen to the three of us talk right now and say that, we're big bad liberals who want to raise taxes and not cut them. My overarching point about this whole debate, and it has been this for years now, but this is heating up. This is going to be possibly the biggest issue of the 2025 legislative session. It's time to really drill into it. But, given everything that y'all have pointed out about the state, the sort of financial situation that we find ourselves in, the reason being, a big reason for that being the federal influx of cash. I mean, we have all this money. Things look really good on paper. I think it's totally fine, appropriate to talk about cutting taxes. If I have to pay less in taxes every year, I'm going to be happy at the end of the day, because the reason that we're paying less taxes means that we're going to have to, forego certain services that we've come to rely on, public schools, public safety, go on down the line about all these things that the state and local governments provide us as Mississippi residents. And, I travel around the state a lot. I talk to a lot of people of different political backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. It's hard to find anybody who could look you in the eye and honestly say that they think state services are being performed well across the board, even as we speak. And, for all these so-called conservative policymakers and politicians who are pushing this elimination of the income tax in particular, I would argue that there has been no bigger risk made in tax policy in the state of Mississippi's history than the one that they are really pushing for and considering right now in eliminating that income tax. And to me, that's not a conservative form of representation. It's just not. It's a risk. And, I'm not an expert. Again, even the experts can't predict this one way or another. But if they were to eliminate that income tax and we have to make budget cuts and further cut into the services that already aren't being performed well across the board, those same policymakers, or at least the next generations behind them of the same political party, are going to have to answer the question, you were supposed to be a conservative. Why are we in this position now? And there is precedent for that, by the way, in other states. Nobody's cut or totally eliminated the income tax, But in several other Republican-controlled states, they have greatly, significantly reduced the income tax and had to turn right back around and redo it. And they lost elections because of it. They lost a governor's office because of it. I mean, there is some precedent for that. So, my overarching thing is, if you're going to push for it, that's fine. It's your prerogative to do that. But we need to have an honest conversation about the big picture and the reason why we are where we are and what could come of this before we just rush into it. And I was glad to hear that there was at least a little bit of that on display at this tax summit the other day, Bobby. And hope we continue going into this session with that.
Yeah, one real interesting little point that came out of Grover Norquist's talk that was at least kind of ironic. Of course, he mentioned as a bad thing that in Oklahoma, there was the House and the governor were trying to eliminate the income tax, and the Senate leadership would not go along, but all they wanted to do was the grocery tax. So as it turned out, Oklahoma eliminated its grocery tax, but they still have an income tax.
I'd like, again, before we wrap up, I'd like to say one thing. One thing I'm pleased of or think they deserve a little kudos is lawmakers are having some public hearings on this in advance of jumping out there with anything. Speaker White, he had a big public summit. He's created a committee that's already had one public hearing and at least a couple more coming up in the coming weeks. I think Lieutenant Governor Hoseman has formed a public-facing select committee that's going to have some public hearings too. That's the way to do it compared to maybe some of the attempts we've seen in recent years when, at like 5 o'clock on a Thursday or something, surprise, we're gonna eliminate the income tax
on deadline.
Yeah, that happened once actually. So this is the way to do it. You gotta commend them to that. They say they're gonna look at the overall structure and they're gonna do it publicly and they're gonna do it in advance. So that's, to me, is commendable.
Yeah, I asked Speaker White at the summit if his proposal would be available and completed before the session began in January. He would not commit to that. He said that he just didn't know at this point in time. But they are working, as you said, they are holding hearings and working ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know this is going to be a big topic come the first of the year in the new legislative session and in the meantime. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting this one pretty often.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for the chat. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to it.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That address is podcast@MississippiToday.org. Y'all can also reach out to me or any of my colleagues through social media or email. And as always, thank you for your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app or stream episodes online at MississippiToday.org/theotherside. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganucheau. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.